Welcome to episode 86 of the 3M Fear podcast. This is part 2 of the Arushi Talwar murder case. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, then check out the previous episode because 1 always comes before 2. A brief recap. Rajesh and Nupur Talwar, along with their maid Bharti, found their 13-year-old daughter unfortunately murdered in her bedroom. They at first assumed that it was their live-in help, Hemraj Banjadi, who had committed this crime. But a few hours later, his body would be found on the Talwar's terrace. Both of them had been murdered the exact same way, showing that there was one killer. But unfortunately, the killer was yet to be found. In this episode, we will go through what the police found when they started their inquiry. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the 3am Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. Once the autopsy was completed, forensic scientists would say that Arushi was first assaulted with a heavy sharp-edged weapon. She was hit hard on the forehead, and within 2 minutes, she died due to a blood clot. Arushi's parents would later be charged for the murder, and in 2012, when this happened, the CBI claimed that according to the experts, it could have been one of Rajesh's golf clubs, because the dimensions were exact to that of the murder weapon. But the Talwar's lawyer said that Arushi had an hairline fracture and that could not be done with a golf club. Now, talking about the weapon that was used to slit the throat, it was said that it was a cookery knife. The same weapon was used on both the victims. In May of 2008, forensic scientists would say that the way that the cut was made was so precise, it was as if the killer knew where the right spot was to cut the windpipe and dissect the vital left common carotid artery. That is, the killer knew exactly where to cut that the supply of oxygenated blood to the brain would be stopped. That is exactly why initially Noida police thought that the parents did it because they were doctors and they knew how to use a weapon such as this, a surgical knife. By June of 2008, the CBI suspicion has shifted to 3 Nepali men because it was also believed that the weapon could have been a cookery knife, a type of Nepali knife. Now, the first CBI team said that it could have been a surgical knife, but then they went to a cookery knife. But a second CBI team returned to the surgical instrument theory because in 2013, CBI told the court that according to the faculty at the Talwar's alma mater, Maulana Azad Medical College, their dental students were taught surgery, which meant the Talwars knew how to use a surgical knife. But at the same time, the Talwar's lawyer argued, saying that the dental scalpel that was given to them was not sharp enough to cause this kind of injury. So it could not have been the Talwars. Now, with all the to and fro happening, the police went back to square one, looking for new suspects. But this time, the crime scene was so badly contaminated that the investigation was poorly handled and there was nothing that they could do. The only evidence that they could find were 2 fingerprints that didn't match anyone. There was no sign of forced entry. No one got into the apartment. One of the gates was latched, not locked, which means someone must have come into the apartment and then gone out and latched it from the outside. There were also 2 sets of keys to the apartment, one that belonged to Hemraj and the other that belonged to Nupur, which she normally kept on her bedside table. The morning that Arushi's body was found, there was confusion about the gates and keys. Remember, in the beginning, I told you Bharti tried to get in, but Hemraj was not there, and so Nupur had to go and throw down the key. But when Bharti came back, she saw that it was unlocked. It was just latched. The door was not locked. Some say that Nupur may have unlocked them herself. Another clue was that the night before, Nupur had used her keys to go into Arushi's room to turn on the internet router. She couldn't remember if she had left the keys in the door by mistake. The next morning, she said that she found her keys on a frame sculpture near the front entrance, the place that she said she never put them. So, who put them there? This raised a lot of questions. Did Nupur lie about the keys? Or did she put them there? Or was someone else involved? Rajesh claimed that he forgot to lock their bedroom door that night, so someone could have come in and taken the keys without waking them up. But it seemed strange because no one noticed. They never woke up. This all seems strange because why would they have not noticed if someone came into their room, especially if this was between midnight and 1 am? The whole key situation is a bit suspicious. There are a lot of other things that don't add up in this investigation. Nupur's story about the keys changed a lot. Either she left them in Arushi's room and the killer got them that way, or she wasn't telling the full truth. Also, the key to the terrace was never found. Another strange thing about the internet, the router was turned off at 3:43 am and then turned back on at 6:01 am. The Talwar family said that it was because of power outage, but the electricity board confirmed that there was no outage that night. That meant someone must have gone into Arushi's room at 3:43 am to turn the internet off and then went back in at 6:01 am and turned it back on. There is no other explanation to this. Both Hemraj and Arushi's phones disappeared after the murders. Hemraj received a few calls on the night of May 15, one of which was an unknown number. The call was traced to a public phone nearby, and Nupur also tried to call Hemraj on the morning of May 16, but only one of the calls went through. That was only for 2 seconds, and it pinged at a tower near the Talwar's apartment. Arushi's phone, which she usually used until late at night, went silent at 9:10 pm on May 15. Now this was odd because she would usually be texting or calling her friends up, but on that day, she didn't. The phone was later found in January of 2009 by a housemaid who gave it to her brother. He wiped it and got a new SIM card, but when the police investigated, they found that he had no connection to the murders, just an unfortunate person who found a phone. Now, something else strange on Nupur's phone was that it was turned off from 7:40 pm on May 15 until 1 pm on May 18, before the murders. Before the murders, her phone had never been off, not even for a second, for 60 days, which made this all the more suspicious. For 60 days, her phone had never been off, but on the day of the murders, somehow her phone was off for a specific period of time. Another important piece of evidence was the whiskey bottle. Remember the whiskey bottle that was found outside, and Rajesh thought that Hemraj had drank his whiskey. It had both Hemraj and Arushi's blood on it, as well as some unidentified DNA. The bottle had been taken from the hidden liquor cabinet behind a wooden panel. Now, someone who was very close to the Talwars, or who lived with the Talwars, or the Talwars themselves, could only have known where this liquor cabinet was. There was no sign of any forced entry, and Arushi's face had been covered, which meant the killer did not want to see her face, or maybe he felt some sort of a guilt. All this pointed to someone who was very close to the Talwars. If the Talwars did not do it themselves, it was someone very close to them. And one final big twist in this case was that the doctor who did Arushi's postmortem exam changed her report 6 times over a period of 3 years. 6 times. At first, he said there was nothing abnormal. There was no rape, no assault, nothing. But later he said that there was an opening of her vaginal cavity, which meant that something had happened to her. Then later, he would say that her clothes were taken off, her genitals were washed, and her clothes were then placed back on later on. I'm not sure why the doctor would change his report, maybe once because of some sort of an error, but 6 times. At first, he said that there was no sort of sexual assault, but later he would say that there were 2 female DNA profiles on Arushi's swabs. One was hers, and the other was that of an unknown woman. Some say that maybe this was a case of mixing evidence, that Arushi's evidence got mixed with someone else's. Everything about this case, from start to end, is a whole mess because it seems as if not a single person took their job seriously. I'm sorry, but I have to say it. Not a single person, starting from the people who found her until the end, not a single person took their role seriously because it seems like everything was contaminated. Not just the crime scene, but even the evidence, the post-mortem reports, everything. When you think that nothing could go worse, Arushi's autopsy file goes missing. It was said that this could have been a sort of cover-up. Someone didn't want something leaking out, and that's why, but her autopsy file just disappeared. Arushi's bedsheet was said to have a wet circular mark below her pelvic area, but it was said that it was not urine. Now, nothing like this was found on her pajamas, but once again, we know that her clothes were changed. I don't want to go too deep into the rape scenario because the doctor himself is not sure. It may or may not have happened, but there definitely was something to it because her clothes were definitely changed. One last thing to add is that the doctor said that there was a wide vaginal opening, and this remained that way because maybe someone tried to manipulate the body, and when rigor mortis set in, the body hardened and then it just stayed that way. So after murdering Arushi, someone tried to do something with her, rigor mortis set in, and then the body just hardened in that exact same position, and that is how doctors could find out that her body was tampered with. Now, given all this confusing situation, the police focused on Arushi's family, especially her father Rajesh. On May 23, 2008, Rajesh was arrested. There was no real solid evidence against him, but because the police were under intense pressure from media and the public, they had to solve the case, they had to do something, and that's why Rajesh was first taken in. The police started to consider that maybe this was a case of honor killing. Maybe Arushi was murdered because she was doing something that her parents didn't like. One of the biggest theories out there was that Arushi, who was 13 years old, was having an affair with Hemraj, who was 45 years old. Rajesh somehow caught them that night and out of anger killed both of them. Maybe Rajesh walked into the room, caught them doing something, got angry, and then in a fit of rage ended up killing Arushi and then Hemraj. Another theory says that Hemraj was the person who tried to confront Rajesh, who tried to blackmail him about Arushi, and because of this, there was a whole fight, and then Rajesh ended up killing Hemraj and then Arushi. And about Nupur's role in all of this, it was said that Nupur was just a helping hand. Now, the police ran with both of these theories. They didn't know which one could be true, but they assumed that it was a mix of both. There was an affair, but they were not sure who confronted whom. Did Rajesh confront Hemraj, or did Hemraj blackmail Rajesh? Now, there is another angle to all of this which is not talked about a lot. Once again, in part 1, I had mentioned something about the Duranis. The Duranis were really close friends with the Talwars. Now, it was said that Rajesh was maybe having an affair with Anita Durrani. If you remember, they were not only friends, but they also co-owned the dental clinics. So it was said that maybe Arushi and Hemraj found out about this affair and they tried to confront them, and that is what led to this murder. Maybe Arushi walked in on Rajesh with Anita Durrani, found them in a compromising position, and then confronted them. It was not just the police, but the media also were running around with so many theories that at one point the police really got frustrated and they didn't want to hear another theory. They just wanted to find their evidence. Arushi's friends were questioned, and none of them ever said anything about an affair between Hemraj and Arushi. Hemraj's wife even came out and said that he saw Arushi as a daughter. He looked after her as a daughter, and there was nothing going on between them. At the same time, Anita Durrani would go on to say that there was nothing going on between her and Rajesh. This is a question that I'm not sure if it has been raised a lot because I couldn't find much about it, but here it is. It was said that there were 2 copies of the keys to the house. One which was always held by Hemraj and the other by Nupur Talwar. Hemraj would come, open the door for Bharti. Whenever he needed to come and go through the main door, that was his key, and he would open the door for Bharti using that exact same key. And the other key was with Nupur Talwar. When Hemraj's body was found, no key was found on him. Let's say that his key was still in the house, which meant that both the keys, the key that was held by Nupur Talwar and Hemraj's key, were in the house. So how come no one found those keys? According to Nupur, Hemraj would usually keep his keys on the sideboard, but on that day, she couldn't find them. If both the keys were inside and the CBI was right, it would mean that the parents locked the door, then went inside their apartment through Hemraj's door, and then locked it from inside in order to mislead the investigators. Now, Bharti would later go on to say that the door was not locked, it was just latched. That is, the middle door was just latched, and the key that they were talking about was about the third door, the main door. All the doors in the house were self-locking. So, if the parents were not the killers, then the killer could have easily just let the door close, it would lock by itself, then latch the middle door, and then close the first mesh gate. When Bharti first came to the house, she tried to open the gate, but she couldn't do it, and so she asked Nupur, and what the CBI theorized was that the gate was originally latched from the inside. When Bharti went down to get the keys, Nupur came from the passage, that is from Hemraj's door, unlatched it, and then went back inside and then said, "I don't know, the door was maybe unlatched and you just didn't check it enough." But something strange here is that when all of this was going on in court, Bharti said that she may have given some incorrect statement and she was not sure whether the door was properly closed or not. She took back the main statement that she said. She just flipped over and said, "I'm not sure if that actually happened or not." Presented Rajesh's driver, Umesh Sharma, as a witness. He said that this outermost door could be opened by pushing it hard. If only Bharti had pushed hard enough. Now, talking about Arushi's room, Nupur remembers going into Arushi's room the night before when she was reading a book, but she said that she did not remember whether she actually locked the door or not. She went through several lie detector, brain mapping, and narcoanalysis tests, and she cleared all of them. and everywhere she said that she had no idea. In 2013, the SP Mahesh Kumar Mishra told the court that on 16 May 2008, Rajesh Talwar claimed that he had locked from the outside at 11:30 pm on the previous night. Rajesh also told him that he had forgotten to lock his own bedroom door from inside, and someone could have easily come in and stolen the key and then opened Arushi's room. After a terrible press conference, the Inspector General who held it was moved to a new job. By the end of May, the CBI took over this case. The CBI discovered that 90% of the evidence of this crime was ruined because of the mistakes by the police or contamination. The Talwar said that they had nothing to do with this murder. The Talwar said that they didn't hear anything that night because their air conditioning was too loud. Now, people of course didn't believe, because how could someone not hear a murder? Their daughter probably could have been screaming at the top of her lungs, begging for mercy, and the parents didn't hear? To test this, the CBI tried to see if the Talwar family could actually not hear anything in their room. Now, what they did was that from their team, they sent some into Arushi's room and some into the Talwar's bedroom. Unfortunately, the test showed that the Talwars could not hear anything because the air conditioning was really too loud. This wasn't a perfect test. They didn't do the experiment in Arushi's room. It wasn't done in a way to mimic a murder. That is, there was no one screaming as such to mimic a murder. I assume that they just stood in the room and tried to talk and see if they could hear from the other side. The CBI then looked into other possible suspects. One of those suspects was a man named Krishna Thadaraj. He was a Nepali man who worked as a helper for the Talwar family's dental clinic. 2 days before the murders, Rajesh got upset with Krishna at work because of a mistake that he made, and Krishna was so embarrassed that he apparently swore that he would take revenge on Rajesh. Rajesh would go on to say that this entire story about honor killing and this secret affair was all made up by this man Krishna. Krishna was also friends with 2 other men from Nepal, Rajkumar Sharma, who worked as a servant for a family friend of the Talwars, that is Anita Durani, and Vijay Mandal, another servant who worked for one of the Talwars' neighbors. Soon, Krishna, Rajkumar and Vijay, all 3 were arrested, and the police shifted their focus from the Talwars to these 3 men. To get more information, the police used controversial method like a narcoanalysis test. Now, this test is also called a truth serum because once a person is under this, they are in a hypnotic state and they start talking the truth. Based on these confessions, the police came up with a new theory. The 3 men went into Hemraj's room at the Talwar house around midnight to drink together. The investigators had of course found an open bottle of beer, a glass of whiskey, and another glass of lemonade in Hemraj's room during investigation. Now, this was all strange because Hemraj was not a drinker. As they drank, Krishna allegedly started complaining about how Rajesh had humiliated him at work. The men agreed that Rajesh was a very bad man and the tensions grew. Then the men entered Arushi's room and tried to assault her. Now this was where Hemraj drew the line. He stood up for Arushi and he started arguing, saying that maybe Rajesh was a bad man, but Arushi didn't deserve this because after all, Arushi was like a daughter to Hemraj. But when Hemraj threatened to expose them, Krishna got angry and murdered Arushi, and then they murdered Hemraj together. When this new theory came to light, Rajesh was released from custody due to lack of evidence, and by then he had spent 50 days in jail. Now, there were a lot of problems with this theory. First, there was no physical evidence or DNA to prove that Krishna, Rajkumar or Vijay were in the Talwar home that night. The narcoanalysis tests were unreliable and inconsistent. These tests weren't even allowed as evidence in court because of how inaccurate they could be. The men's confessions didn't match up. All three gave three different stories, I believe. Despite all this, the police were under intense pressure to solve this case. It was as if they just wanted to pin this crime on someone and close the case. Now, another point here is that domestic helpers like Hemraj weren't allowed to have guests over unless they had permission from Rajesh. So, if Hemraj had company, Rajesh would have, of course, known about it. Hemraj's wife would go on to say that he kept telling how strict Rajesh was and how he was not allowed to have any guests there unless Rajesh approved. Also, Hemraj was someone who didn't drink alcohol at all, so it was hard to believe that Hemraj could have been the one who drank Rajesh's alcohol. Hemraj's autopsy confirmed that there was no alcohol in his system. What made all of this even more suspicious was that the beer bottle, whiskey glass, and lemonade glass that was found in Hemraj's room weren't visible in the photos that were taken on the first day. So when the police entered on the very first day, these things were not there. So did someone plant them there later on? The apartment where the Talwars lived had 6 security guards on duty the night of the murders. None of the guards ever saw anyone walk in or out of the Talwar apartment. Krishna's family provided an alibi for him, and Krishna would later go on to say that the CBI had tortured him to get this confession. He even said that the former CBI director told him that if he confessed, then he could get a reduced sentence. And there was this raw footage of Krishna's narco analysis test, and it was said that it was anonymously leaked online, which showed him repeatedly saying that he was innocent and he didn't do anything. The person who conducted this narco analysis test was later removed from her position for falsifying her date of birth. She was also accused of manipulating video recordings in her tests and torturing some of the people who were sent to her. So you can imagine how badly people had screwed up this case. After Arushi's case, thousands of her previous cases came out where it was found out that she was trying to mess up many different cases such as Arushi's. Similar to this, Vijay Mandal, one of the other suspects, said that he was beaten and then bribed by the CBI to go and say that he was there. Rajkumar Sharma, the third suspect, said that CBI offered him fame, said that he would be famous if Krishna was the one who committed the murders. Now the CBI also found this kukri knife, that is the traditional Nepali blade, from Krishna's home, which had blood on it. They brought in 8 experts who checked and then later said that the blood that was found on that knife wasn't even human. Forget about Arushi's, wasn't even human. In the end, the narco analysis test was inadmissible in court. The men's claimed their testimony was enough to show that the CBI tried to push them to prove something that didn't even happen. And the alcohol that was found in Hemraj's room, according to the initial photographs, wasn't even there on the first day, which meant someone else planted it there later on. With no solid evidence against these 3 men, the CBI were back to the Talwars. They got hold of the golf club from the Talwar's attic, and the shape was an exact match to the injury that was found on Arushi and Hemraj's head. The CBI also suggested that the cuts that were there on their necks could be with a surgical knife, which once again, as said before, could have been Nupur and Rajesh Talwar, because both of them were trained to use a surgical knife. They were dentists but still trained to use a surgical knife. Now when the CBI started investigating, they couldn't decide or couldn't come up with which one could have been the murder weapon: the kukri knife, a golf club, or a surgical blade. Their theories seemed to jump from one to another. In the end, the case was riddled with unanswered questions, conflicted theories, so many unreliable witnesses, and so much of evidence lost or tampered with. Over time, this investigation became so complicated that by 2010, the CBI decided to close the case. In their report, they named Arushi's father, Rajesh Talwar, as a prime suspect based on circumstantial evidence. But later on, they would say that they couldn't charge him because there was no physical evidence and there was no clear motive. The CBI theorized that Rajesh killed Arushi and Hemraj and somehow got Hemraj's body to the terrace, decided that he would get rid of it later, but by then the body was found. But the question here is, if Rajesh did this, then of course Nupur knows about this. And if Rajesh and Nupur both knew about this, both committed the murder, hid Hemraj's body, and then decided to get rid of it later, why would they call all of their family and friends and say, "Come, see, our daughter is dead. Someone murdered our daughter, or Hemraj murdered our daughter"? Why would they try to get everyone into their house before getting rid of Hemraj's body? It just didn't make sense. In January of 2011, the Talwars challenged the CBI's decision to close the case, but their petition was rejected. Then on January 25, 2011, Rajesh was attacked outside the court. It was said that a man slashed his face, head and fingers, likely because of anger, public anger. By February of 2011, the CBI changed their stance. They decided that enough was enough and they charged Rajesh and Nupur Talwar with murder. The couple were arrested and the trial began on May 11, 2013. During the trial, the Talwars requested more DNA testing. That is, remember, a bloody handprint that was found near Hemraj's body on the terrace. Whose handprint was it? 2 bloody handprints that were found on the whiskey bottle. Whose were it? The golf club. Was it really the murder weapon? Now it was surprising, but the court denied these requests. DNA testing could have given them more answers. Maybe not the exact answers, but more answers. But the court said no. And unfortunately, the Talwars couldn't say anything. Now all of this, the Talwars begging the court to go and do more research, could point towards the fact that maybe the Talwars were not the actual killers. Otherwise, why would they ask the court for DNA testing? Now, speaking from another point of view, Hemraj's wife testified during the trial and said that Hemraj had once told her that Rajesh had a very bad temper. He would get angry over small issues, and that sometimes Hemraj even feared for his life. On November 25, 2013, the trial ended. Rajesh and Nupur Talwar were found guilty for murdering Arushi and Hemraj, destroying evidence and misleading investigators. They were both sentenced to life in prison. After this, Hemraj's wife gave an interview where she said that she was deeply affected with this tragedy and that she had been bedridden for months after her husband was found dead. She also said that her family struggled financially, but overall, Hemraj would have never harmed Arushi. On January of 2014, the Talwars appealed their sentencing. On October 12, 2017, the Allahabad High Court overturned their guilty verdict. The court stated that the prosecution had failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. They said that the Talwars had been victims of media trial and deserved the benefit of doubt. But Hemraj's family and the CBI both filed appeals to challenge this decision. In 2018, India's Supreme Court agreed to hear their case, leaving this matter unresolved even today. This case is so incredibly confusing and there is so much missing evidence. I don't know how many times I have said this, but there is so much missing evidence. For instance, there is no proof that anyone other than the Talwars ever went into the apartment that night. The guards at the apartment did not see any strangers enter or leave. There was no sign of forced entry and no DNA evidence linking to anyone else in that crime. At the same time, there are a lot of strange details about that night. Arushi's Wi-Fi router, which was in a room that was turned off and then turned on early in the morning. This happened at 6:01 a.m., right at the time that Bharti was about to come. When Bharti came and rang the doorbell, Nupur opened the inner gate to let her in, which was strange since Nupur had previously said that the door was locked and that she couldn't find the keys. The Talwars also said that there had been a power outage and that's why the Wi-Fi was not working. But there was no evidence of any power outage. Another thing is that Hemraj's phone was still in the area when Nupur was calling it early in the morning. And once his body was found, it was said that he was murdered around the same time that Arushi was. So his phone was still in the area when Nupur called, just nearby. Or maybe in the house itself. Now, even with all of this evidence pointed towards the Talwars, there is no clear motive. This is why this is a very confusing case. The Talwars hadn't made things easier, and neither did the police or anyone else involved. Arushi had been a beloved child, and from all accounts, from everything that people said, her parents had a great relationship with her. Just hours before her death, they had given her an early birthday gift. And one big lingering mystery was the whiskey bottle that was found in the apartment. The fingerprints that were never found. It had 2 unidentified fingerprints, neither of those belonging to the Talwars. Could it have been from one of the 20 people who were invited into the house? Could one of them have picked it up and then kept it down? I don't think the police ever investigated those 20 plus people who were invited into the house. In the end, the case remains full of unanswered questions. Was it the Talwars? Was it someone else who managed to leave behind almost no trace? Without any motive, without any strong proof, it's very difficult to say. I would like to know from you, what do you think about the case? From what I can recap, the Talwars, if they had committed the murder, why did they call all those people in? And why did they purposely try to ruin their one chance of getting rid of Hemraj? But at the same time, if it was someone from outside, how did this person easily get in and then out without leaving any evidence? If Hemraj was killed somewhere else, why were there no evidence of his blood being wiped or found anywhere else in the house except the one place where he was found, that is the terrace? Where did the terrace key go? What happened to the phones, Arushi and Hemraj's phones? Who turned off and on the internet router? What about the latch? Did someone do it or did Bharti just miss it? So many questions. I think this needs a lot of discussion, and we could have a discussion about this case and the possibilities. Maybe I missed something, maybe there is another theory or another angle that you may have thought of. So I'll put a question. Let me know if you're open to having a live chat about this, because I would like to know from you, what do you think had happened that night? Also, if there are any other cases that you would like me to do a deep dive on, then let me know. I'll link the form in the description. Just click on it and add the case that you want me to cover. Until then, stay kind and stay safe out there. A big thank you to all my fellow listeners who have been listening and supporting this episode. Your reviews, your listens mean a lot. If you love this episode, if you love the stories that I put out, then please do leave a rating on whichever podcasting platform you're listening from. It would really mean the world to me. Other than this, I also have a YouTube and an Instagram page. I'll link it in the description. Do check it out. I have different stories on Instagram, and I'm planning to put out some short horror stories on YouTube, so do subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned. I am also an author, love fiction stories. If you want to check out my free fiction book, I'll link it in the description. I'll also link my other account in the description, where I talk about fiction writing, travel, and I also will soon start sharing fiction stories. So stay tuned. So do follow me there. Thank you so much for everything. That's all for this week. Stay kind, stay safe, and see you next week.